Hello, hello. How y'all doing? Happy to see you. Oops. Timer. Didn't mean to do that. Hold on. I fixed, hopefully my pixel ratio so that things aren't a little squished anymore. Okay. It's not an app. I just made a movie in After Effects of a clock and dropped it into OBS. Okay, hey, let's get started. So today is our second class on synthesis. We are going to use the Ableton instrument called Analog. If you don't have this under instruments, I am sorry to say that today may not be very useful for you. On the one hand, this is a thing that only comes in Ableton Suite, which is the most expensive version. It is a pretty standard synthesizer though, and if you don't have it and you want to stick around, you will still definitely learn and understand how synths work in a new way, and that will apply to other synths that you maybe don't have. So, analog. What are the advantages of analog? Why is it called analog? What is the point of analog? It is analog because the software that makes it up models actual transistors and tubes, and it like models the circuitry of an old analog synth. So rather than just doing the math of the idea of an oscillator, it's actually modeling the like what the circuitry was of those devices that they used back then to do the math. So the idea is that you get more attractive sounds of a certain vibe, meaning like a more kind of classic vintage feel. That said, it doesn't actually, you can make any kind of sound in this, and it's not just for kind of like retro anything. But, oh, a lot of white noise in the background of my voice. It's really just my computer fan. Let me get my microphone closer. Turn the volume down. How's this? Better? Okay. Thanks. Cool, so that's analog. I also picked analog to be first because... Weird. F-sharp pedal. Okay, let's figure this out. I don't want it to be annoying to you guys. How about near now? Yeah, so I think okay, thanks. Sorry, thanks for your time. Yeah. I had my uh, laptop mic selected instead of my mic. Okay, thanks. Sorry, thanks for your patience. Okay, analog. I also picked analog because it's the one most similar to the one we worked on last week, so it's a natural bridge. Okay, so today I want to talk us through, I'm going to go a little bit quickly and not do lots of stopping for you to practice stuff because I want to have a good chunk of time at the end, hopefully, where I can just set you loose and give you some instructions of sounds to try to make. I would also love to hear sounds that you make. So I could spend like 15 or 20 minutes after 1 o'clock, after class, after 2 o'clock. If you want to email me MP3s that you bounce of sounds that you make, we could sit around and discuss them. Okay. So I'm going to be connecting ideas to last week. This synth is really a whole lot the same as what we looked at last week with Helm. It just doesn't have all the same visualizations, but the basic architecture is the same. So let's get started. First, you have oscillators. So I'm going to talk us through in the order that signal flows. Signal starts with the oscillator, and you have 2 of them, and you can turn them on and off like this. The oscillator then flows into the filters and then goes into the amplifier. The LFO is used to modulate lots of different properties throughout, and then it goes to the final global controls and goes out. So we've got 2 filters as well as 2 oscillators, and you can set the routing. We'll look at this again in a minute. You can control the routing of sound within here, oscillators and amplifiers, to mix them in different ways. But know that the first control here for your first oscillator is how much of a split you want to do between sending it to this filter and sending it to this filter. So this is kind of a crossfade. Now it's sending only to filter 1, now it's sending only to filter 2, and now it's in between, sending equally to both. So we're going to do the simplest routing first, which is just oscillator 1 into filter 1 into amplifier 1 and out. So oscillator 1 has a couple of shapes. You should get to know the sound of these basic waveform shapes. Turn. I'm going to get myself a new one of these without anything set. Okay. And now sine, really mellow, has no overtones. Saw, quite buzzy. Square wave, also buzzy. Noise. This is just what a random wave looks like. So the oscillator can be tuned to different octaves, to different semitones, and these are cents, which are hundredths of a semitone. So 3 is the same as 3 semitones. So the whole structure of this is that there are different panels of controls around the edges, and then there's a display in the middle. They call this the shell around it and the display. So you can click on any of these areas and see more things that you can control. So here we have an envelope. Remember, an envelope is a shape over time that maps to some parameter. On the oscillator panel, it maps to pitch. It's a pitch envelope. So you can make it be like this. So this is how fast it goes up, and this is how much it goes up. And let's talk our way through a couple more of these things. Lots of these are in common in different parts of the program. But we've got, okay, pitch mod. This is how much you modify pitch. And there's different ways to do it. Key. Whenever you see key here, this is how much do you want to change the parameter based on which note you play. So right now I'm playing C3, the C below middle C, and it's like our anchor center point. And if we turn up or down this value, the further a note away I play from C, the more it gets modified. How does it get modified? By the LFO. So I can turn on the LFO and get a slow sine wave. And turn this up. And so again, pitch. This is all about pitch. And this is how you can connect the LFO to it, or connect different keys to it, keys of the keyboard. Pulse width is a property only available on the square wave, and it refers to the width of the up versus the width of down. And there's actually a good visualization of this if you do rectangle in LFO. So this is just a visualization of the same thing. So imagine this is your square wave, or pulse wave it's also called. Pulse wave modulation does this to it. And you can hear the effect. I'm going to take the LFO off. And we get different overtones. This is a nice thing to have in motion. So I'm going to turn the LFO back on and take it off of pitch and put it on pulse width. Yes, pulse width is only for pulse waves or square waves. So this is a nice way to create some motion. We're going to make a Reese Bass later, which is a classic bass synth sound. And it uses this. Okay, so there's also a subtone. So you can turn on sub and turn up the level. And it adds a second oscillator an octave below. So if you want to get a fatter, deeper sound, you can add sub. And then there's sync, which makes a copy of the wave and modulates it with ratio. So this is something that you can use to make our sounds have different overtones. Basically, it's like the nasty knob. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to play with all of these things that I've talked about. So play with tuning, play with pitch envelope, and you can turn on the LFO and turn up LFO on the different parameters here to hear it operate. Try sync, try sub. I'll give you 3 minutes for this. Okay, come on back. So let's talk about the next portion, the next module here. So we have signal starting in an oscillator, and then it goes to a filter. So our first choice is which filter. It's good to have a mental image of each of these filters as you go. So let me pull up an EQ. So low pass 24 dB an octave. This is this guy. This means it cuts. Oh, no. That is the opposite. This is a low pass filter. Low pass because it lets the lows pass. 24 just means it's a steep one. And this is a 12. 12 dB an octave just means as it goes up, it drops 12 dB by every octave. So the first one there is the steep. The default is the steep low pass. I'll do high pass next. High pass is just the opposite. It lets the highs pass, and you have a steep one and a less steep one. Band pass is one of these guys, like a bell curve. And a notch is the opposite. It cuts frequencies like this. And I don't know, 4-pole, 2-pole, I don't know what that means. And then formant. We talked about formants last time. Formants are resonant, extra resonances that are characteristic of the human voice. So if you ever hear a synthesizer that sounds like it's kind of talking, it's formant filters in operation. So let's also talk about resonance. So there's two properties to every one of these filters. There's frequency and resonance. So let's do a common one. Low pass 24. That's this. So this is frequency that I'm changing. What frequency does it cut off at? This is resonance. If you, let's just listen. You can sweep like this with no resonance. But if you turn up resonance, it makes a bump at right below the place where it cuts. So there's much more of a like a wah kind of sound with a lot of resonance compared to no resonance. So those are our main controls for a filter. Next, we have the envelope that lets us make changes to the filter over time. So you can shape it here or here, the different portions. Again, we have an Adsr envelope, just like last week. So there's an attack portion, how long it takes to sweep the filter up, and then immediately it sweeps down to this point, and then it holds here until I release the key, and then the filter does that. So let me dial in. So here over 3 seconds, you're going to hear it get brighter as the filter opens up. So it's going to do this for 3 seconds. And then, let's see, in 1 second, it's going to drop back down to the sustain level. And then when I let go, it's going to release over this amount of time. It's also, we're going to have no sound after I let go because of the amplitude envelope, so we won't actually hear the release. But okay, I'll play a chord and listen for 3 seconds of filter going up. And now we're plateaued here at the sustain level. So this is how you can make a brighter attack, or a kind of like a wah-wah effect. You can do linear shapes or exponential shapes if you want them to be more smooth curves. And here's two other things I want to point you to before we look at the mods. Legato means if I am playing a series of notes that overlap, it applies the envelope only to the first one. If I turn it off, I'll play the same thing. Each note has its own own envelope. Wow, 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 wow. If I turn on legato and I play them all, it's maybe even better if I switch into mono mode, where there's only one note allowed at a time. So I don't get different wahs on each note if I play the notes legato, meaning they overlap when I play. Okay, so that's the filter envelope. We also have an amplitude envelope that works exactly the same way, only for volume instead of for the filter. And it works the same way as the pitch envelope. The pitch envelope is just a simpler envelope model. It's just an attack. It's not a ADSR. So why don't you take a couple of minutes and play with these settings, try to get a filter that you can hear and make changes that are audible, noticeable. Figure out how it works. Oh, and then reso. This basically makes the filter a lot more noticeable. By adding that resonant bump at the cutoff. Okay. 3 minutes on the clock. Go play. Nice, nice. I hope you got a handle on this. Come on back. Okay, I'm going to point you to two other things relating to this filter. They have to do with velocity. So remember, velocity means how hard you hit the key on the keyboard. This can be mapped to your filter envelope to give it more variety and expressiveness in your synth. So if that's where I am now, whether I play a loud note or a quiet note on the keyboard, the shape is always the same. But if I turn up attack to velocity all the way, it's going to let how much velocity, how fast, how hard I hit the note, change the attack time. So I'm going to go quiet to loud now on the keyboard. And then this is the same thing, but rather than just affecting the attack time, it affects the whole effect of the filter. So like a quiet notes, the filter opens less. Loud notes, it opens all the way. And that's pretty extreme. It's doing a filter through the whole range. That's pretty nice. Okay, let's talk about mods here. No, let's do drive first. So drive is just overdrive, so like saturation. We talked about this last week. When the waveform, it adds a boost in gain, and then the waveform clips. It goes too high or too low, as if it was going to be too loud on the meter. And then it chops off the amount of the waveform that is clipping in a kind of analog way. So you just have a couple of different settings there for different flavors. 1, 2, and 3 for each of these are less intense to more intense. And symmetrical and asymmetrical just have different sounds. So I'm going to cycle through. Yeah, so this adds warmth and a kind of human, well, human is a stretch, but it adds some analog warmth to the sound. Okay, let's talk through the mods. So these are ways to modify the frequency, and these are the same ways to modify the resonance. You can do it by LFO. So again, let me make myself a sine wave LFO here. If I turn up LFO on frequency, now this LFO sine wave shape is modulating this, just as the same as if I was going like this with my finger. Same with the resonance. If you turn on the LFO and you turn up this, it maps that LFO to the resonance knob as if I was going wow, wow, like that. So that's the kind of sound effect you have. It's just like an extra resonant buzzing. So that's LFO. It can also be modified by key. So again, this is the notes on the keyboard. The further away you play from C3, it's going to change the frequency cutoff. So I'm just going to try this out if I turn it all the way up. So here it's making the filter darker the lower I go, and should go up brighter the higher I go. Yeah. If you set it to 0, the whole keyboard. Might be wrong. It might be 1 where it's exactly even through the whole keyboard. Same thing is true here for key with the resonance. Last is envelope. So this is how much this envelope is actually doing the filter. So if you set it to 0, it's kind of like how big is the envelope filter? How much does it push and pull on frequency here? And the same here. So we could have a let me just see this. Okay, so here at 0, this envelope isn't affecting the frequency at all. Well, am I hearing a difference? Oh, the LFO on resonance. Yes, okay. That's what was confusing me. So we could make this shape only map to the resonance. As if I was going up and then down and plateau and then let go. So I can do that automatically here. Woo! Let's do it longer so we really hear it. Go over. Yeah. Okay, so that's how you can map this to different parts of it, frequency and resonance. Okay, the last thing I'm going to point you to before you can play with this yourselves is loop. So we could set, I'm going to take this back to here. Okay, so we can set loop, which is going to loop different portions of our envelope here. So we could loop attack, decay, and release. Can get more effect. Can kind of hear it. There we go. So you can have a looping envelope as well. Okay. Go play with this, and we'll come back to talk about amplitude. That'll go fast. It's pretty much exactly the same. Talk a little more about the LFO, and then how to fit 2 oscillators and the noise oscillator together in the global controls, and the last few things here. Okay, so let's just do like 2 minutes here, and I'll answer questions. Okay, come on back. Home stretch. And then we'll start. I'll give you some things to practice with. Okay, next we have the amplitude. So amplitude is just volume. So this is an amplifier that takes our signal and boosts it. And we have the same, I'm going to simplify my sound here with... Cool. So amplitude. There's also an envelope for volume. This is how you can make sounds that fade in slowly. Let me get back to polyphony here. So if you're making pads, you want to have a slow attack, so they sit in the back of the mix. All of these things are the same as they were in filter. You've got a loop. You have ways to modulate it by the velocity of the keys. You can have it be one envelope for a whole series of overlapping notes with legato, or free, we didn't talk about in the other. Free is, it skips this portion of the envelope. So this is really great for sounds that aren't meant to sustain. Like if you're making a snare drum sound, you probably have some noise and then a filter on them that does the shape of a snare drum hit. And you don't want it to sustain different lengths based on how short or long you play the note. You want it to just play the whole thing straight through. So free skips the suspension of time that happens in the sustain portion of the ADSR envelope. And you have the same LFOs. So if I've got, if I want to apply the LFO to panning left and right, I can do that here. If I want the low notes on the piano to be panned differently than the high notes, I can do it here. Let's just try that. I hear this on the right of my headphones. And high notes on the left. Yeah. And then also this envelope could map to the panning if you want it to spin from one side to another. And then you can do LFO on the volume level. And you could also have low notes and high notes have different volume levels. Yes. Okay, so while we're talking about LFOs, let's talk about the LFO panel here. So there's two LFOs. The rate is how fast a cycle is. The cycles have a couple of waveforms also. Triangle, rectangle is good for like off and on. And noise 1 just gives you random levels. Noise 2 interpolates between those random points with lines that connect them. So rather than stepping from random level to random level, it interpolates linearly between them. Again, on rect, we have width, just like we had on the square wave, we had width, modifies the same thing, which you can see here. Retrigger will start the LFO over again every time you play a note. If it's really important to you that the initial sound is at this value, on. It's possible if retrig is off that you play a note and the LFO happens to be on the off position here, in which case you wouldn't hear the sound until the next cycle. So retrig on might be useful for you if you want the initial state to be the same for every note that you play. And you can offset the shape like this. And you can delay how long it takes to kick in. So like here I'm going to play a note, and a second later the LFO is going to kick in. Or you could have it fade in over the course of time. Yeah, so here you can hear the difference between retrig on and off. If I play a whole bunch of notes with retrig on, it's going to start all their cycles when I play the note, and so they're all going to be out of sync with each other. But if I turn this off, there's only one shape going that modifies all of them. LFO can also be set in rhythmic units rather than in hertz, which is cycles per second. So we can do it in time that maps to our tempo, like to eighth notes. Okay, we are almost to the end, and I'm going to keep going, and then I can give you some project ideas. Okay, so these are things that apply to everything. I'm going to do I'm going to turn this off. Okay, so this is the global panel, and we have some things to think about that affect the entire plugin here. Quick routing. So we've gone through one chain, but we also have a second whole chain. There's another oscillator that gets combined. There's also a noise oscillator. And it has its own filter. So these things get mixed together. I'm not sure how noise factors in this routing chart, but let's think it through. The routing could be oscillator to the first filter to the amp and out, which is how we've talked it through right now. Or it could be that the two oscillators are combined and they only go through one filter. You could have the two combine and then they both go equally through two different filters and two different amplifiers. Or you can have them go more sequentially, where the two oscillators mix, they go through the first filter, then they go through the second filter, and then they go out this amplifier. So, other things that you can control here. Vibrato. Let's see, you turn up vibrato here. And it adds some pitch LFO modulation. You can delay how long it takes to kick in. Or you can have it fade in with an attack. Like that. You can tune your whole keyboard by octave, semitone, or detune. You can make it monophonic or polyphonic, meaning how many notes are you allowed to play on the keyboard at once. And let's talk about the next thing here, Unison. So this lets you add voices. So this is like in Helm, there was the way to just like double and detune multiple copies of a synth. So if I've got 4 voices here and I turn up detune, I get a fatter version of it. And there's some chorusing as the slightly detuned versions of the oscillator are reinforce each other and interfere with each other. This delays the entrance of those other voices if you want to have a kind of expanding over time sound. So why is less better in this case? If you've got a... there are some synths that are monophonic as just like by design, like basses are usually monophonic. And it's just a characteristic part of their sound. Like a 303 synth that's like, acid techno kind of sound, that is monophonic, and it's just like part of the quality of the sound that it's just one note moving around a lot rather than playing whole chords and stuff. So I don't know why you would do 2, for example. I haven't ended up in a situation where that seemed like the right idea to me, but having multiple voices does use more CPU. So I don't know, you can think about it that way. Great. I'm going to skip over these things. Not so important. You can look them up. Glide just adds some slide between the notes. And you can make it slower. Or faster. And legato means it's only going to glide if you're playing... if the second note that you play is overlapping with the first note. So I'm playing all of these legato on the keyboard, meaning I'm adding the new note before I lift the old one. And now if I play separately, it doesn't slide between each one. So that's one whole chain through. And you can just get more complex, rich sounds with a second whole chain. So that's our whole class for today. I want to give you an idea for practice, though, and I can stick around and we can do some of this together if you want. A great way to learn is to take a preset, and then take it apart. Turn everything off. And turn things back on one at a time. So you can hear the simpler parts of the sound. And then tweak. Just to reinforce what different controls do to the sound. Okay, so we're getting back to a really simple thing here. Yeah, and then we add the filter and see what that's like. Okay, interesting. So this sound, if I turn all of these off again, I see. It's the LFO. I was wondering why. So this oscillator is for a kind of high shimmer. And then we've got this lower oscillator for like the body of the sound. So you put them together and you have that kind of undulating body and this shimmering thing on top. So you'll learn how to decompose sounds and then think about building them up from scratch. I think it's harder to build sounds up from scratch than to start with a preset and take it away and really learn how that thing happens. So I suggest you do this. If you want to send some sounds, let's say at 2:20, I'll be here. I guess, does anyone want to sit here right now and work on sounds for 20 minutes and send them and then discuss them? If so, say so in the chat. But if you're all ready to move on, I too will move on. Okay. Cool. Great. Then let's say for the next 20 minutes, you work on sounds. And you can either mute me and just do your own thing, maybe start with a preset, take it apart, tweak it, make your own version. Or you could leave me unmuted and I will walk everybody through making a really classic electronic bass sound called a Reese Bass. So either work on your own thing or stay here and I'll walk us through a Reese Bass. And then at 2:20, you can export MP3 and drop it in the Discord server, and I'll load it up here and we'll listen and appreciate and talk about each of these. I recommend extremely, whenever you get a good setting here of a sound that you like, hit this Save Preset button, the floppy disk, and give it a name. The project of developing your own sound as a musician and producer is by making your own sounds one at a time for each project, but then saving them into your own world of presets so that when you start new projects, you start reaching for your own presets rather than the stock presets in the program. That's how you develop your own sound. Okay. For those of you who are going to say goodbye, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate seeing people show up. So I do this 3 times a week. There's all kinds of information down below. Sign up. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't. You can hit the heart button above right now and hear when I'm coming online. And otherwise, I'll see you soon. On Saturday is our next class. And I'm going to talk through a live performance setup that I have spent the last week developing for myself for a show that I did last night. So Saturday is all about live performance. Okay. If you want to make your own sounds, hit mute. If you want to stay with me and make a Reese Bass, here we go. So just a little history. The Reese Bass, I'm grabbing you a link real fast. To the classic track. So it's actually invented by a house DJ called Kevin Reese Saunderson. And that track is here. So let's spend a moment just listening to a bit of that. Jump ahead till you hear the bass, and we'll get that sound in our head. I bet it's something that you've heard before. Okay, so we're gonna make this. Yeah, classic sound, drum and bass, house music also. And here we go. I'm gonna start from an empty analog. Okay, so we're going to do two oscillators. One is a saw wave, and the other is a pulse wave. I'm going to do this step by step and leave a little bit of time each time so that you can do it along with me more step by step. So go ahead and do this. Saw wave on one, pulse wave on the other. Okay, maybe we want to thicken this sound. Let's do Unison. Or maybe just a little bit of detuning. Go ahead and do that. Okay, next I'm going to play a little bit with the detune between the two oscillators. Again, just to give some body to the sound. And also a little motion. When you have two oscillators that are slightly detuned from each other, they phase in and out, and so you get some kind of it's like a gentle LFO filtering effect. Next, I want to take this pulse width. I want to get a little more motion in the sound. So I'm going to take the pulse width, turn it all the way up, and turn on the LFO, and map the LFO, LFO2, turn that up. And then I choose a rate that sounds good to me. Go ahead and do that. Let me know if I'm going too fast or if you want me to do anything again. Okay, so just to recap, what I just did was to add more motion to the sound, and I did this in two ways. By detuning one of the oscillators, so I get some phasing between them, and also by taking my pulse width modulation, turning up the width, and turning on the LFO, so the width changes like this. Okay, next we want to filter all of this down. Right now it sounds like a lead because it's bright and high, but we really want it to sound like a bass and be low and resonant down low. So we do this with a filter. But first, now we have our first question of routing. We want one filter to apply to both of these oscillators. So I'm going to go over to the global panel and choose the filter routing that does that. I've got two oscillators going into one filter in this one. That's what I want to do. So I choose this. I see. I just got how this works. So remember, we have this amount that I send from filter 1 to filter 2, filter 1 or filter 2. What this diagram does is just sets those values for you. Okay, so I've chosen the routing where both oscillators go into one filter. So now I just want to turn the freak down and the resonance up. And I don't actually want this. I don't want this filter to be happening on each note. I just want one constant filter. So I'm going to turn off the amount that this, basically I'm going to turn off the filter by turning envelope under freak mod down to 0. And I'm noticing that as I play higher, I'm playing higher than the frequency cutoff and the note is going away. So I actually want to set key to 1. And this is going to move the frequency cutoff point to be the same relative to whatever pitch I play. So go ahead and do this. If you got it, do it. If you want to hear a recap, here's the recap. I set my routing to be 2 oscillators into the top filter only. I turned, under freak mod, I turned envelope to 0 so that this has no effect. And I turned key up to 1 so I get my filter cutoff to travel with me when I play different pitches. Okay. Next step is to make this monophonic to be a good bass. So I'm going to go over to the panel, the global panel, and set my keyboard to mono. Joseph, we haven't done any FM synthesis yet. I'm actually not sure if I'm going to or how. Are any of the Ableton instruments FM synthesis instruments? Maybe electric? I've never used this ever. No, that looks like a physical modeler. Oh, Joseph, write me a little more about what you mean. I may just need a little jog in my understanding. What I don't think you can do in Operator is take one oscillator and use it to modulate the other oscillator. I guess you could do a really fast LFO, but no. Okay, Operator with this kind of mapping stuff is maybe FM synthesis. I'll need to do a little research. There's the sound. Okay, so I had cut off the frequency too low. But yeah, now I've got the monophonic is a key part of it. I also want to take off this amplitude envelope. So I'm going to envelope to velocity. I don't want that. And I'm going to take up the sustain portion. So basically this means the note is always the same volume. I also want to get some of that saturation on, so I'm going to go back to filter and do one of the harder versions. There we go. So there's a ton of variations on this sound, but they're all they'll have some of these common elements. There's always at least the pulse width modulation with the LFO. There's a filter with resonance to make it a bass. And there's something to give it some motion. And that can be a combination of pulse width modulation with the LFO or just detuning to make a wider, more fluctuating sound. Okay, so if anybody wants to shoot me a sound, we can give a listen to whatever you've made. The first LFO, let's find out. Nothing. It was not hooked up to anything. And then you might want to make it a little more expressive by mapping the frequency to like your expression wheel on your keyboard. So you can do Command M and click and then touch your mod wheel. And get that kind of thing going on. Yes, yes. Cool. So I'm going to go hop on the Discord and see if anybody's dropped any synth sounds from today. And we can play them and cheer. If you have something, go ahead and bounce it and drop it up here. And let me know in the chat that you're doing it, so I know if anybody's doing it. Okay, I'm not sure that anybody's doing this, so that's fine. I'm going to call it a day. Thanks again for coming. See you Saturday. Okay, Zach, great. Whoa, I like this already. Let's listen to Zach's. Great motion, great richness. We've got some low tone and some high tone. I wonder if that's the nasty knob, the pulse width. Oh no, the sync knob. Oh, it shouldn't be warped. Sync on both. Cool. Yeah, I can hear that like high partial ringing. Okay, I'm gonna call it a day. Take care. See you soon.